Hello and welcome to episode 3 of a little mini series I'm doing, little mini podcasts as part of Thyroid Awareness Month. This video or little mini podcast, if you're listening, is all about the common symptoms associated with thyroid disease. Now, the previous video was talking about all the different ways, all the different kinds of thyroid disease, all the different things that can go wrong with the thyroid. And so this video is going to give you some of the common symptoms for those various different thyroid issues. And that way, this is where I think you probably want to take particular note if you may be thinking you might have a thyroid problem, because there are many different symptoms and we're not going to cover them all in this video. I've seen, for example, for Hashimoto's or hypothyroidism, lists of up to like 300 different symptoms. And when you think about the fact that, like what we learned from video 1, was that the thyroid hormone is required in every single cell of the body, and every single system within the body needs optimal thyroid hormone to function optimally, then you can imagine that if that's not happening in whatever different way, that there are a plethora of different symptoms. Now, I'm going to actually deal with the thyroid cancer symptoms first. And then I'm going to come to the hyper and hypo symptoms. So, and thyroid nodules. So I'll deal with the thyroid nodules first. You might notice sort of swelling in your throat. You could possibly feel lumps. You might also have difficulty swallowing or breathing. So you definitely need to get them checked out. Probably have an ultrasound. Some thyroid nodules, statistics say about 5% are cancerous, so it's not something you should ignore. Certainly anything, because the thyroid sits in the throat and you've got airways and breathing, they're pretty central functions to human life, so you definitely want to get those investigated. Thyroid cancer symptoms could be, I suppose, being aware of things like change of voice, like other people might notice this too, like in you, maybe even more than you would notice it. But like if your voice changes, if you've got an unexplained cough, like you just can't get rid of a cough, an unexplained cough, breathlessness, difficulty swallowing, or like lumps and masses that you can feel in your thyroid. So you definitely want to go get those things checked out. Some of those symptoms, this is where it's tricky with thyroid, do overlap, particularly with hypothyroidism. So this is why it is important to investigate, to go get proper tests, perhaps ultrasounds, biopsies, definitely blood tests. We'll talk about testing in the next video. But if you, as you're listening to some of these upcoming symptoms, particularly the next lot, which are hyper and hypo symptoms, if you've got a collection of them, and you've got this sense that something isn't quite right, that you're not quite yourself, that something is going on and you can't quite pinpoint it, that actually is a really common symptom that something is wrong. So please do go and investigate these things. Thyroid health, although extremely common, is really, really important to have managed well for all of our systems in the body to function well. So, let's have a look. Now, I have put together over a few years 30 common symptoms for hypothyroidism and 30 common symptoms for hyper. You will see some of them overlap. I'm not going to go through all of them now. I've got lists of them. I will share them on social media throughout May. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'll flash up some lists, and if you it's easy to kind of Google lists as well. So now remember from the last video, hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's is often the most common cause of hypothyroidism, is when the thyroid runs slow. So things wind down compared to hyper, which is things revved up. So in general terms, this is where hypo symptoms are commonly things like fatigue. Your just whole body feels slow and heavy and you can't get out of bed, and walking can be an effort. Walking up the stairs can be an effort. You've just got this malaise and fatigue. That's very common. Unexplained weight gain, and difficulty losing weight is very common. It's not, you don't have to have the weight issue to have a hypothyroid problem, but it is a very common problem because the metabolism runs slow. And so you can imagine then it's easy to put on weight and have difficulty losing it when your metabolism doesn't work properly. There are mood symptoms like depression and anxiety. Now, sometimes anxiety is more associated with hyperthyroidism, but it actually is a common hypothyroid symptom as well. Gut issues are very, very common with all autoimmune diseases actually, but things like constipation, very common with hypothyroidism, leaky gut, bloating, what other sort of, those sort of fluid retention, you can feel, well, that's separate to gut issues, but gut issues very common. Things like low libido, low motivation, cold extremities is common with an underactive thyroid. So fingers and toes freezing cold because, your body is prioritizing keeping your organs functioning, and so extremities don't get as much blood flow. Circulation is a symptom. Non-restful sleep. The outside third of your eyebrows is common to lose that hair in the outer third of your eyebrows with an underactive thyroid. Thinning hair. Sometimes people will lose hair from their head in clumps, or definitely thinning and brittle hair is a common underactive symptoms. Things like puffy face, that's sort of fluid retention, but as well like puffy face. You can have a goiter. You can have a coarse sounding voice, like a lower sounding voice. You can have an enlarged tongue. So some of these things, like I said before, kind of fall into that thyroid cancer symptom. They're not always, could be a hypothyroid symptom as well. Lots of aches and pains, muscle weakness, what else? Low vitamin D. They're probably the most. Infertility actually is a really common underactive thyroid symptom. So that's why often it's when people are trying to fall pregnant, they may be diagnosed with hypothyroidism because infertility can be a problem. Heavy periods can be a symptom. So that's quite a lot, right? And I know it's easy to pass off some of these symptoms as belonging to something. I'm tired because I'm busy and stressed at work. I'm, fatigued because I'm not sleeping well because I've got a baby, or, there's a lot of easy ways to pass off some of these symptoms. But if you have a collection of them, and like I said before, you have a sense that something's not quite right, then please go and get them checked out. And in the next videos, which will be number 4, I will talk about the tests to have done. Now, when it comes to hyperthyroidism, I'll run through some of the most common symptoms, and you will see that some of them overlap. So you can have similar symptoms, but they're coming from a different cause. Like, for example, so this is some hyperthyroid symptoms. So we've got things like hair loss. These are commonly with hyper is the bulging eyes, a goiter, feeling very revved up. So we remember hyperthyroid is when you've got too much thyroid hormone. So you might have unexplained weight loss. You have trouble maintaining weight. You're eating a lot, but you're not maintaining, or you're losing weight. You just feel revved up. You can have heart palpitations, anxiety, difficulty sleeping because you're just wired and tired. And tremors, your whole body can go into like a tremor, shiver, sort of like internal tremors, sweating a lot. So remember, we're like, it's like that overheating, over revving, over production of thyroid hormones. You can be fatigued, but it's a different fatigue to the hypo, because you're fatigued because your body's so revved up and so, producing so much energy that is fatiguing. You can have insomnia, like I said before, difficulty sleeping, heat intolerance, definitely mood swings, like irritability, anxiety, what else? Depression, muscle weakness. So you can see some of these symptoms do overlap. Again, infertility, loss of libido. Your skin with hyper tends to be more warm and moist. With hypo, it's dry and cold. So there are some different skin, plays out in skin differently. But yeah, you're probably the hyper symptoms that people notice the most are that feeling agitating, feeling revved, heart palpitations, the shivers, bulging eyes. So they're common hyper symptoms, and really serious that you especially when you're getting the heart issues, very, very important that you get that checked out properly. You don't want to muck around with those symptoms and think they're going to go away. You do need to get them investigated. So that's a bit of a wrap up. Like, it's a very kind of whirlwind trip through some of the most common symptoms of thyroid disease: hypo, the cancer, the nodules. But it's usually when you have a collection, and you start to notice quite a few different things and you start to connect some dots, that is, I guess, what I would say, particularly given that this is coming out for Thyroid Awareness Month, is that being aware that whilst a lot of these symptoms can be common, they're not always normal. And they do require proper investigation. So please do get them investigated. I'm about in the next video to tell you how to get these different things investigated and some of the problems that come up in having them investigated, because the reality is our mainstream medical system in Australia and in many other countries around the world, I've discovered from having the podcast and talking to people all around the world, they're very similar issues. So I'm going to tell you some ways that you can hopefully not have problems being diagnosed with a thyroid condition. So thank you very much. Don't forget to share this. Don't forget, if you want to dive into some of these basics in a bit more detail, and certainly when it comes to managing thyroid health, if you know you've got one, grab a copy of my book, Let's Talk Thyroid. I'm waving up the original cover, which was Kiss and Make Up With Your Thyroid. But if you go to letstalkthyroid.com or Amazon, you'll find it. And yeah, don't forget to share this video with someone who you think might benefit from listening to it, because that is the whole point of Thyroid Awareness Month, is to raise thyroid awareness. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Let's Talk Thyroid. If you have enjoyed the content, or perhaps you're thinking, oh, my mum needs to hear this, or my sister or my bestie, I would love it if you would share this episode with them. That really just helps spread the positive and practical message of Let's Talk Thyroid, and helps that broader thyroid community, our friends and family, to live well with their thyroid health. So you can just, share the episode. If you subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast, it's free. It's really helpful, because then you'll be notified every time a new podcast comes out, and it just makes it much easier to find. There's usually a little subscribe button or a bell, or follow often is the terminology. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be helpful. Of course, if you want to leave a review, even better, just a sentence or two about how the podcast has helped you. You can definitely connect with me via letstalkthyroid.com. That's where you'll find access to my book, my coaching, my freebies, and really everything that I offer in terms of thyroid support.